So, Hira, welcome to the Fail Wisdom podcast.
Thank you. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you, and really looking forward to our conversation. You've got a lot of experience with women all around the world and mentoring and so many different things. You're in so many organisations, but just briefly, just tell us who you are and what you're up to.
Okay, so I'm Sahira Sumar. As you said, I do a lot of different things, but I guess at the moment I'm really following my passion.
Can I just say something? I think I'll stop. Your bracelet, can you
bothering
hear
you?
it?
Yeah, I did.
It's going to come out, like stuff like that comes out.
Take it off?
Probably.
You can start again then?
Yeah, we'll start again.
Okay.
It's better now that we just started.
Yeah, I use my hands when I talk.
Is that sometimes when people use lapel mics as well, like jewelry clinks on it or something?
Yeah, sorry, I just got it's not an easy one to remove. It wasn't designed.
Want me to help?
No, it should be fine.
Okay.
I just got to find the right little place to stick my finger in. It's such a bad design, actually. Maybe I do need your help. I normally take it off myself. Sorry. Hang on. There we go.
Great. Okay, we'll just start again. Okay. Good. All right, so 2, 3, 1. Welcome to the Fail Wisdom podcast. I forgot your name.
Sahira. I know, there's a lot for you to remember.
I know. Sorry, that's so silly. Oh, okay. All right.
You want a piece of paper?
No, I got it here. You know I do this every time. Hi, Samira. Welcome to
Sahira. You know the way to remember it?
Yeah.
It's like Sahara, the desert, but with
okay.
an E. Sahira.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I've got an I there.
Ah.
Sahira. Actually, the guy that's coming next, he said, my name isn't spelled K-H-A-N, it's K-A-H-N. I said, oh, sorry. I'm terrible. Anyway, let's start. Little clap. All right. So, Hira, welcome to the Fail Wisdom podcast.
Thank you, Paul. I'm really excited to be here.
Yep, I'm excited to have you as well. You've got a lot of experience working with women and mentoring and corporate and a whole lot of stuff that you're going to bring to the episode today. But just to start off, just briefly tell us a bit about your background and what you're doing.
Yeah, great. So I'm Sahira. I actually was born in Kenya in East Africa and migrated to Australia when I was young. But at the moment, I'm really working in my place of passion. So I work with a women mentorship program that's a global program. I work with the United Nations on human rights issues. And I'm also working with as an executive manager for a non-for-profit. So all my sweet spots.
Okay.
I'll tell you all about that.
Awesome. Well, so to start off with, this is the Fail Wisdom podcast. And I know we had a previous chat that you don't really believe in failures or the concept around it, and we'll have a conversation about that. But over your extensive career across multiple sectors, what was one of the most significant failures or any other word you'd like to replace with that you experienced, and what key lesson did it teach you that shaped your approach going forward?
Yeah, look, when I first read that, I thought, oh my goodness, failure is such a heavy word. And for me, as I've pivoted through so many things, I don't like to think that I have failed, but more that I have been searching and learning and maybe made mistakes for sure along the way. But I guess failure just seems like so heavy. So that's why I kind of had a bit of an aversion to the word.
It is a heavy word, and that's why I use it on purpose, because like my startup failed, and 9 out of 10 or 19 out of 20 apparently do fail, and I'm trying to make that a much lighter word, like, because if you don't fail or make mistakes or, then you don't learn. And so, I mean, I've interviewed, for example, the founder of Twitter. His nickname's Rabble. He said, in Silicon Valley, we have like 7 failures before we're successful, The funny thing is he was actually working on a podcast app, and then they went to Twitter, but that's another story. So what would you replace that word with?
So I guess I see failure and success as two sides of the same coin, the same journey. It's just your framing of how you see things happen. So for me, I guess the biggest learning across my journey and doing multiple things has really been a greater understanding of myself, who I am, my identity, and really being true to my authentic self. That to me was the journey. And when you talk about failure, I guess it's me failing to recognize that early enough, and me pivoting into so many different roles, almost searching for the thing that really fitted. And it's taken me years of doing very many different things to find that. So while I can see it is failure to recognize, it's been the launch pad for me, really, moving me forward.
So let's go back to young Sahira and tell us where this all started and what was your upbringing, and then how did this all come about, and how did you work through it?
Yeah, that's a long story, but I'll try and summarize it. So as I said, I was born in Kenya from a fairly conservative family, I guess fairly traditional, did the right things. I was a middle child. I'm sure that has its own implications. But very much the girl that did good. I always was the good girl, right? So I did what I was expected, very compliant, not very noisy, not very visible, didn't even have my own ambition, certainly didn't even know what I liked. I just liked what everybody else liked. And I felt, now looking back, that all I did was wanting to make everyone happy. And if they were happy, I was happy. Right. And I did that for a lot of my life growing up. And then I guess that followed in going to school, getting good grades. I did all the right things. Went to university, got a great degree, and then started work. And I was in the corporate space. And even there I found I just did what I was expected to do. I was very compliant. I was a good follower. Right. Can't say I was a good leader because and I think that's where I really started to lose my identity. I never really had a clear sense of who I was and what my identity was.
And what do you think's behind that? Why do you think you were like that when you look back?
Yeah, look, it is a good question. I think fitting in was really important for me, wanting to feel loved and belong.
Yeah.
Not that I ever...
As we all do.
Yeah, as we all do. And not that I had any, parental issues. I had a wonderful, loving family. So, but I think it was just within my nature to just want to keep, when others were happy, I felt happy. But then eventually I realised as I was getting older and just doing what everyone else expected, that I wasn't actually living my life the way I wanted. There were things that were lacking.
So that was like a pivotal point in your life.
Very pivotal, yes. And I realised as I took on a number of different roles in companies that I just wore their identity. I would take on their values. I would wear their identity, and I would be that person. And that's why I was successful in those roles.
Right.
And then one day when I applied for a very senior role, so I was in a global one, and then I wanted to progress even further. And one of my white male, I might say, bosses.
Sorry about that.
It was my awakening. Said to me, Sahira, you'll never be corporate enough.
Really? And
I think that was the day. It was earth shattering. I can't tell you how awakening that just took the veil off, if you like.
Yeah. I would see that as a compliment.
Now I do. I didn't then.
Maybe did you a favour. I mean, it's a very ignorant and brutal statement to tell somebody. But you hear a lot of these stories, and it can shatter, especially younger women or men, so it can shatter their confidence,
Yeah, you see, at that time, I'm a woman of colour, I'm a Muslim woman, and even though I don't wear a hijab or anything, but so I don't look it. But fitting in, I denied all of my cultural heritage. I changed my name from Sahira to Sarah. So for the longest time, my corporate friends all called me Sarah. And so I fitted in. Yeah. And then when somebody suddenly tells you, it doesn't matter what you do, you're never going to fit in, I think that was when I realised that, okay.
We're going to fit into the old boys club.
Yes.
The old white male club, unfortunately, it is very much like that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Never been in the corporate world, and glad that I haven't, to be honest. Sounds pretty bad. So many people are burnt out, and I mean, startups, founders are burnt out as well. They can get burnt out, but getting burnt out in a corporate culture, just doing stuff for,
For
a lot of it's-
others.
for others and for profit, and it's so I mean, so that was a pivotal point. And then what happened after that? I mean, so you feel pretty devastated in that moment. And then what happened? What did you do?
Well, I guess it gave me a lot to think about
Yeah.
because I realized, okay, maybe I've hit the ceiling, as they say. But honestly, I felt that now I wanted to do it for me.
Right.
So I left and I started my own business. And this is where I started to get into my own startup, if you like.
Which was really easy, I'm sure, like all startups, right?
Oh, my God. It took me 6 months to just think. To actually shed,
Yeah.
took me 6 months to shed all the personas I had worn, all the roles I had played, and unpack and, peel back the layers to then truly think, who am I? What does my business stand for? And who, what are my values?
Yeah. I mean, having a startup can be like a real rude and quick awakening, It's like, like compared to the corporate world, it's like you got to do everything.
Yes.
And you're responsible for everything, and it's totally a big wake up, really. And it's interesting.
It is, and asking for help
Yeah.
and being vulnerable, all the things that I had never allowed myself to be, actually then work for you when you're in a startup, when you're the leader, when you're the boss and you're driving your own business.
Yeah.
Those are the things that actually matter.
And so talk a bit more about being vulnerable in a startup. So what does that mean for you? And
Yeah, so I think it's being very open to what your limitations are. You can't be everything to everyone.
yeah,
So it helps you to be clear about what you stand for,
Right.
what your values are,
Yeah.
what do you want to drive as a business, who your customers, all that. So
Yeah.
the clarity piece becomes really important. I think the other vulnerability is knowing when and where to ask for help. In the corporate, that's frowned upon. What you can't cope, you're asking for help. Are you not good enough?
yeah,
This is the dialogue that plays in your head. You've got to shed all of that. And suddenly you've got to say, no, I can take on help. And actually that's going to be even better. So partnerships, collaborations, networks are all important. So I guess really understanding that vulnerabilities can work for you was a big lesson.
And do you think that's been part of your current success in startup world, having that experience and going through all of that?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I mean, each time I've always had the mindset of wanting to continually improve and stretch and grow. So I've never been satisfied, and that in itself has its challenges.
Well, that's very entrepreneurial. Like most entrepreneurs like that, they continually want to know more, grow more, do more things. They're never satisfied with just going along with the same old thing.
Yeah, do more. That's the thing, and that's where the burnout comes to be fair.
Yeah.
But I think that has helped me also to pivot. And I was actually once I was really clear, I was able to follow my passion and my dreams. And so I started my own consulting work, my company, and I took my consultancy into the developing world.
Right.
I took it back to Africa, where my heart really was.
Yeah.
I worked for the World Bank. I worked for the WHO, World Food Programme, some amazing organizations where I could really help build leadership capability and capacity. And that was when I realized I'm doing the work I was meant to do.
Yeah. And I imagine it'd be so much more satisfying, even though really hard, be so much more satisfying doing something that you really believe in, no?
Absolutely. So for that longest time when I pivoted into my own business, I did feel like a failure. In fact, my corporate colleagues kept saying, are you okay? You didn't make it, but
Oh my God.
Yeah, so that was what failure felt like. But when I came back from one of my trips, the World Bank, one of my World Bank projects in Africa, I was in a workshop with a whole bunch of amazing women who are doing leadership things every day, but they don't call it leadership.
Yeah.
And one of the women actually said to me after my workshop, she said, I'm going to pray for you tonight. To me, that was a turning point. I thought, okay, I'd much rather be prayed for than have just keep working for money and the bottom line and the bonus. And I think that's when I realized I was in the right place and no, I had not failed.
Yeah. It's like what is it? The mouse on the wheel that's going round and round.
The
the corporate.
treadmill.
Yeah. And you're just after better position, more money, and then what does that end up in? You know what I mean? Is it like, and then you get to that ultimate goal and then everything's happy and you've got your boat and your big house, and a lot of people get to that point and they're just like really lonely because, the journey they've been on, they haven't really looked after everything else around them.
Yeah, so true. Lonely. And again, I come back to that identity piece because I used to work with senior executives a lot.
Yeah.
That was my role, is to work with high potential and talent. And I had grown men in their 40s crying at the end of, they'd come as far as, now they were on the treadmill. They had to continue because they had obligations.
Yeah.
But they were not happy inside and they didn't know who they were. And they'd lost touch with their families and all the rest of that. So, that can be a really tough world as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, startup world can be, is really tough and can be lonely as well. That's why I always think it's best to, be in a space with lots of other founders and people around you that are supporting you. Like in Sydney, you've got Fish Burners and Stone and Chalk, and here we're at the Western Sydney Startup Hub, and there's so many different places now where they can get together and find support and education and all of that. Because like even when I started my startup journey, it was mainly just doing it part-time and from home, and it did get quite lonely actually, so
yeah, that definitely is that side of it. And I think that's where you have to make the effort to make sure you network, make sure you're meeting others, make sure you're learning from others. Because, of course, the downside is you don't have all those people around you as you do in a corporate setting.
Yeah.
You are pretty much it.
Yeah.
Decisions are yours. So there is that end of it. But again, with that comes a lot of satisfaction, a lot of learning, a lot of growth. And I've thrived on the whole networking. I love meeting people and learning from them and seeing what they do and looking at how I can take that on. So, you just got to really pivot your thinking.
Yeah, it's really difficult, but it's really satisfying as well, particularly if you know what your why is and what your goal is. If you're not in it for the wrong reasons, you really believe in what you're doing, but you still have to have that business foundation or, learn it along the way, not being having a business background. And you didn't have a business background either, right? So, the corporate would have given you something, but when you started in your startup without a business background, how did you get through that, and how did you learn the things that you didn't know, and how was that for you?
Yeah, look, even though I was from corporate, I wasn't in every department. I wasn't in sales. I wasn't in marketing. I wasn't in finance.
The two big ones, or three big ones.
Yes. I was actually from learning and development. But I think at learning is really where it came from for me. So I actually surrounded myself with some amazing mentors. Okay. And I'm such a big believer, and this is why I started Worldwide Sheroes, my social enterprise. Yeah. Because I think mentoring is really what got me through, is surrounding yourself with the right mentors who care about you.
I think the right is key here, because when I started in the startup, I had people that were coming in and giving me advice, and had good intentions, but one would say this and one would say that and one would say the other. So it has to be the right people that match with you and the right experience. No?
Yeah, so there's difference between advisory or advisors and mentors.
Yes.
I think it's really about being clear, approaching someone and saying, would you mentor me? And because then they're holding your hand through your business, not just giving random advice, which you've then got to decide, is that relevant or not?
I don't even believe in advice anymore. I used to have a segment and say, what advice do you give for early stage startup founders? And I think one of the people I interviewed said, well, the advice that you have is different to everybody. Everyone's on a different journey. I thought, that makes sense. That's why it's better just to learn from stories. But if you have a mentor that's been through the same thing as you, that's why I do this podcast. So startup founders that are on that journey or been through that journey, then people can relate to that and not necessarily be like, oh, no, I advise you to do this or that. No, just talk to them and, find out, what issues they're having and try and talk through it, and they'll work things out. I think also, having a mentor can help. But at the end of the day, like you said, we got to make the decisions. That's usually, at the end of the day, it's our intuition as well. But the mentor can help with, getting through that, I guess.
Yeah, look, I find the mentoring shares their wisdom, shares their journey, and shares their learning. And from that, you pick what you can take, right? Yeah. So your journey may be similar, may be different, the context is often different, but what learning and wisdom can you take from there? So you don't fall into the same mistakes as they did, or you can at least avoid it.
It's exactly what this podcast is about.
Yeah.
I think for me going back, I remember a couple of mentors. One was like, you have to do this, this and this. If you don't, you're going to fail. And the other was like, no, you need to do it this way. And then be like an hour and a half on the phone. I'm like, oh my God, what do I do? I was more confused than ever, so yeah.
I've had those too.
I've actually had some people on my podcast, they talk about mental whiplash when it's too much, So the right fit, the right person has had the right experience, and not just giving their advice what they think is best, because you don't know what's best for that person.
Yeah, actually, you can feel quite overwhelmed.
Yeah.
But the best mentor I think about is Yoda and Luke Skywalker.
Of course.
Because he answered everything with a question.
Yeah.
I love that. And that's kind of what I teach my mentors, because now I've got a pool of 150 mentors around the world. We've set up a global network of mentoring.
Okay.
And I train them on how to be a great mentor.
Yeah.
And so, we look at best practice, but we also look at how to actually bring the best out of the person. And that's really what the role of the mentor, not to just overwhelm you with great information and their journey.
I did a course last weekend, and it's part of it's like motivational interviewing. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but that's a really positive way, I guess, to mentor, just to bring out, so the person reflects and makes their own decisions, but they think about it more, and they think about the different choices that they may not have thought about, that sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. And we also use strength-based mentoring. Strength-based mentoring.
Okay, yeah.
So I get my mentees to do a strength-based profile, and we understand what their 4 or 5 top strengths are.
Okay.
And then we mentor in that space, because the research shows that we perform better if we work to our strengths, rather than trying to correct weaknesses. And yet corporate, and this is when I realized corporate was all about fixing your weakness. Your performance discussion, everything was about
negative.
It really isn't, maybe it's shifted now, but it really wasn't then about building your strengths. And we know we thrive when we work in our strengths.
Oh, absolutely. I love that. All right. Well, look, talking about advice and everything else, so what's one piece of leadership or organisational development advice you followed early on that didn't work out, and what would you tell others to reconsider?
Oh, that's a tricky one. I think a little bit to what you said is that you take on everybody's advice, because when you start your startup and there's so many things you don't know, that you're quite happy to listen to everybody. So I think it is about being careful and wary about who you listen to and recognizing your context. And I come back to being very clear about your why and what business you're doing and why you're doing it, so that you can then cherry pick from that what's relevant to you and apply it. So I think you can be very easily overwhelmed by too much advice, too much information, but being very very picky, if you like, right at the start. Then you can.
Yeah, because at the start it's like, or my mentality was like, oh, look, I don't know anything, and what is this, what is that? Oh, this person can help and that can help. And then after a while, you just get a bit overwhelmed. And, like some people, in the end, there was maybe 2 people that, when they talked to me, I found them really helpful, made me think more. And others that I just felt overwhelmed. In the end, I was like, no, I just can't talk to them anymore, So, it's the ones that you feel right with as well. Yes. But at the end of the day, nobody can tell you what to do. You have to use your own intuition or gut, whatever you want to call it, to make those decisions. And usually the first thing that comes to you is usually the right one.
Yeah.
And when you think on it too much, it's like that's when you start getting confused.
That's so true. I feel that you can doubt yourself a lot in this space, because there's so many things you don't know. But then you've got to trust yourself, back yourself, and listen to your instinct, because actually it is your wisdom, and you have your own wisdom. And I think it's learning to trust it. And actually that was the big journey leaving corporate as well, is learning to trust my own wisdom and back myself when I made decisions, because I didn't have a manager that you could go to anytime you had questions, or you had, you had to figure things out for yourself. But it makes you stronger, makes you resilient, makes you accomplished in a way that corporate just doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So a couple of more questions. So for early stage founders trying to build a values-driven organisation, organisational culture, what's the first step they should take to ensure their company grows sustainably and inclusively?
Ooh. Hopefully their values are around inclusion. That might help. So I feel, and I've worked with a lot of corporates now, through my consulting. When I started consulting, I worked
but this
with...
is for early stage
Yes.
startups, just beginning. There's not many people, just bringing a few people on.
Yeah, and I think it is about being very clear where you can about what your values are and what's your business going to stand for.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you stand for everything, you fall. If you stand for nothing, you fall for everything. That's how it goes.
Yeah.
And that's so true. You've got to be really clear. Like right from the beginning, I knew that I wanted to work in leadership. That was my thing.
Yeah.
And then I had to define what that meant. And then I had to articulate who did I want to work with. So as that journey started to progress, the clarity started to come through, and I recognized the values. And now I will just not compromise on that. Mm-hmm. And sometimes when I get overwhelmed and I feel a bit stuck, I go back to that again and go, why did I start this?
Yeah.
What was the thing that I really wanted to achieve? Yeah. And have I gone off the track?
Especially in the hard times.
In the hard times and in the early stages, because you are doing everything.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really hard to keep yourself on track. I like to create a vision board, and I know it's a lot of people think that's a bit old hat, but it's fabulous.
Yeah.
I have a vision board, and I have the mantras that I hold dear to myself. And one of the first ones I wrote on there in the early start is, I am the leader. And that was a big reinforcement I had to keep telling myself.
Yep.
There was no boss, there was no manager, there was no executive. It was me.
Yeah.
And I had to behave as a leader, and I had to be that leader.
Yeah, I think, there is a big learning, but it's a nice learning, like, because me as well, like I was really working for other people always, or I just had, lone solo business or just one or two people. And then, being the leader of a startup with, at one stage, 12 people, you've got to learn those leadership skills, and it's a good thing to have, really. And you've got to step up. You can't just be like it was before. So you need to be a leader.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so that builds sustainability, because now you're building a sustainable team that's based on something of value, and hopefully the team buys into your values and that it's shared.
Yeah.
And then to answer the inclusion question, I guess it's really about recognizing the value of having diversity in your team and in your work.
Yeah.
So I work very much in diversity, so it's something very, very dear to me as well.
Yeah. I was at a recent workshop or chat with female founders around funding. I don't know if you were there. It was a few weeks ago at Fishburners, but anyway, it was quite. I was like, there was only two guys there, but I was interested because I know that funding for females is like less than 4%. What are your thoughts around that? But it's interesting because somebody in the room said, look, I am a woman of colour with a diverse background, and it's really hard to find funding. And another woman that was, don't think she was a woman of colour, but she was from a diverse background. And she said, oh, look, what I did to get funding is I went with my connections, white old male friends, and went with them and then sort of went off that, like they sort of introduced me or whatever. But it's a pretty sad state of affairs if that's the only way that people can get funding. Like it seems to be dominated quite a bit by, and I am one of those old white men, but I ain't got any money to give. So
and if you did, you'd ask yourself, who would I give it to?
Yeah, no, that's why I have a lot of women on the podcast, because I believe in that diversity and helping women founders, because I know how difficult it is,
Yeah, look, I definitely think that's a real challenge. I'm not sure, maybe the diversity does add a whole nother layer of challenge. For me, I guess I've always tried to be as self-sufficient as I can. So, yes, you always need funding, but I've tried to, I feel for me it's a business that has a social impact. So I'm building the business and supporting a social cause. Yeah. And I feel quite strongly that that's an important purpose and profit can and should sit together.
Yep.
And that's why I work it that way.
Okay. All right. So so you're working with your group is mentoring women all around the globe, and you're going into some more countries as well, which is really exciting. So tell us a bit more about that and the work that you're doing and how people can connect with you or support you.
Oh, yeah, great. So Worldwide Sheroes, to me, is my life full circle. I went through that journey myself. I asked for looked for mentors. So I created a mentoring platform that connects women from the corporate sector to women in the development sector. So development sector means these are women who are working in India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. We've got women in Afghanistan, Syria, women in parts of Africa who will never have an opportunity to speak to a senior leader, who will never have an opportunity to know a vice president of a company or, And so I created a whole network of global mentors who give their time to then mentor these women. So at the moment, we've got about over 200 mentees in 35 countries.
Wow.
And
including somebody I had on the podcast recently, Amanda Lee Doty.
Yes, Amanda's one of my global mentors. She's fabulous.
Yeah.
And the good thing about that is it's women sharing wisdom with other women. It's across culture. It's cross geography. I try to match the sector. So we work in health, finance, education, various sectors. But the richness has come, and you could ask Amanda this if you'd known, that the mentors are learning just as much as the mentees.
Yeah.
And I find that just super.
Yeah.
Because it's not at all like, we'll teach you how to be a leader. It's not at all that approach.
You heard the expression, if you want to learn something, teach it.
Exactly.
I was a teacher for many years.
Exactly.
You got to know your stuff to teach it,
Yeah. But the good thing is they're learning together.
Yeah.
So the mentors are also open to learning, and I think the journey has been amazing. So they have a 10-month mentoring engagement. It's structured, it's formalized, it's set up. And then we're now in the process of measuring our impact. A couple of the women have applied for scholarships after the mentoring.
Okay.
One lady from Malawi went and did a course in the US, and she'd never left her village.
Nice.
So,
amazing.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
It must be so satisfying.
So we're growing leaders because I feel very strongly that the more women leaders there are, and I use leaders broadly. It's a mindset, not just a position.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more we're going to see women take charge and really have a bit of a voice.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing.
You can have CEOs, you can have managers, but they're not leaders. And that's where all the problems start, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Good point.
You can have somebody in a low position, but they're a leader amongst their people. Naturally,
Yes, exactly. And so this sharing of wisdom between women is just beautiful, and I think everyone's really gaining a lot from it. Plus, we align it to 5 UN SDGs, so we're in the process now of measuring impact against the SDGs.
Yeah.
And we're always open to work with partners. We're always open to get more mentors.
Yeah.
It'd
be a great opportunity for people.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. And do you have a website?
Yes, it's www.worldwidesheroes.com.
So Sheroes as in SHEROES.
That's right. So we're not heroes, but sheroes.
Yeah, I like it.
And we're worldwide. So it's easy to remember, hopefully. Yeah. We're on LinkedIn. We're on Facebook.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Instagram.
Yeah, all right. Well, I'm sure, maybe some people listening to this podcast would want to be a mentor, and it'd be a very satisfying thing to do.
Yes, I'd love to hear from you. And if you're from a corporate, maybe you want to hear about us too.
Yeah, why not?
I'm now in the process of packaging Worldwide Sheroes to take it into corporate as a leadership offer. Yeah. Because I realize and recognize that the leadership programs that we used to run in corporate actually lacked this social impact. Yeah. So I'm trying to take it back in full circle.
Yeah, fantastic. All right.
So I'm going from the good girl to the girl doing good.
Well, it's been great having you on the podcast, and all the wonderful work you're doing. Congratulations on everything, and it's a real journey. Startup world, and I'm sure what we've spoken about today will help the early stage founders and be inspiring as well to women, to people in the space that you're in, and those that are not as well. So thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been wonderful walking through. But to the startups, and particularly the women, I'd say back yourself. You really can do it, and be true to yourself in the journey.
I love that. We'll end on that. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot, Paul.